Welcome all. We are running these lunch and learn sessions from last month. In Sweden and offshore, we are running sessions for. We had one session in April 26th. There were a lot of people, around 20 more people were there. We had sessions during goal training. They were small sessions, so there was a demand that we should run lunch and learn session to extend this to other communities. So we are running this. We had two sessions for offshore, one yesterday and one today and one last week. So we want to, if some people are in this, because of these domain issues, we might want to have another session. What we want to do in it's an informal session. It should be an interactive session for agile requirement design. These are the times. I think we are already on 10, and these are the session details. Basically, that from here you can start the page.
Is it? Go on to my slide because I don't know what these slides say.
Okay.
So, bit of theory. We're ready to talk about agile requirements design, but that's a tool. Doesn't really matter about tools. Yeah. So what we talk about is model-based testing and a bit of a theory around testing or the history of testing, and then what does the testing in the future look like? Drop a load of buzzwords at you, DevOps and agile, and all these things that people talk about but don't really understand. Yeah. So historically, we've tested in the ice cream, and many people, familiar faces, will have seen this before. Yeah. It's an anti-pattern to all of the newer ways of working, and you talk about continuous delivery, continuous integration. Continuous testing is kind of the strand of new technology, new approaches that we talk about when we talk about testing. It's an absolute anti-pattern to doing those things and doing them quickly, doing them repetitively, and it's created a lot of problems in the way that we see tests being seen done today. Okay, so what this means is we do lots of testing through the UI. Yeah, we're not actually testing the UI, we do testing through the UI to each of the individual stacks of the solution that we are trying to test today, but it's probably the most slow and non-technical way of actually tackling what is a very technical beast. Yeah, so we will do lots and lots of UI-based testing. We won't use traditional testing techniques. That's called the transfer program. Everybody does our testing accreditation through ISTQB or ISB. If you were as old as me, you did it then. But we don't actually apply it. So when I say boundary value analysis, lots of people look at me blankly. When I say equivalence partition, lots of people look at me blankly. We just do exploratory testing today. We do a shed load lots of it through the UI. Yeah. We try and do automated testing again through the UI. We try lots of times. We fail lots of times. It's never stable. We always revert back to manual testing, and therefore we blame the tool. We use a new tool. That's why we've got Selenium, we've got Test Plan, we've got UFT, we've got every tool under the sun, but yet we still don't get a lot of traction through manual UI testing. Doesn't work. It's not the tool's fault. Yeah? We do very little integration testing. When we talk about SIT, we do end-to-end testing. We don't do SIT, we don't do integration testing, we do end-to-end testing. Again, that's an anti-pattern to what we should be doing. And we pay lip service to the unit testing. Yeah? What developer actually does unit testing today versus just chucks it over the fence? They pay lip service to it. Yeah? Absolute anti-pattern to what we should be doing. We want to prove quality early doors, shift left. And again, another buzzword that everybody says and nobody really does. Collaboration is another one. Yeah? So, it's too slow. Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to stable automation. These I've already said. Yeah, it requires a shed load of end-to-end environments. Yeah, now even if you could get an end-to-end environment, Nationwide doesn't have an end-to-end environment. Yeah, there's a myth. It costs a shed load of money to do it, and you just can't prove those things. We don't have the configuration management discipline to be able to do those things, and therefore, is it flawed? Yes, it is. It doesn't actually get to the root of the problem. Yeah, so how many problems have we found that are data related or configuration management related that manifest themselves in the UI fault there, that we raise a defect and we spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks trying to diagnose it. The reality is we could have diagnosed it right away if we'd have gone about it in a different way. If we were slightly more technical, if we were slightly more white box. Yeah? So what we want to do is we want to go from this ice cream to this volcano. Yeah? Flip everything I've just said into how do we face into these problems. What we want to do is we want to break up that technology stack into the individual parts that it's already at. So if you look at lots of IT strategies, and this is the way that Nationwide want to move towards an IT strategy, today we have a big, highly coupled environment. SAP talks to CIS and they cannot be decoupled. That's an anti-pattern to where we want to get to, and therefore if you look at Gary Deleuze's IT strategy, it's all about cutting that in half and using services to make sure that it is decoupled and simplified, because that's what it means by simplification. Yeah. So in that way, we talk about continuous integration, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that we should be doing continuous testing, and we should be looking to set up our strategies in that way. Notice I didn't say automation. I said our strategies, our test strategies. There is no difference in the future between an automation strategy and a test strategy. So, flipping this on its head, actually, what we want to do, and our journey essentially starts from here upwards today. In the future, we want to tackle the unit testing. We want to get into the developer's world and tell them to do a better job. But we ain't there yet. We're not strong enough to have that influence today, because people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We need to sort ourselves out first. Yeah. So what we're starting to do is start to do more API, more service-based testing. We're opening up that black box to be white box testing. Yeah. And we are, by the very nature of the fact you are testing these things lend themselves to far more stable, simplified automation, and you'll see that through Mahesh's demonstration when he starts to talk about ARD modelling and some of the stories that we've got on the back of that. Yeah. So we're starting to do far more of this stuff. We're opening up where do these faults really sit in the IT estate. All of those faults that we found in the online bank, were they really faults with the UI screen, or actually did they sit far down the technology stack where lots and lots of things would actually sit? Yes, they did. So we've got to start doing more of that. What we're not looking to do is we're not looking to get rid of manual testing or UI testing entirely. What we're actually looking to do is actually UI-based testing, not testing through the UI. Yeah. So when you talk about, you'll hear another buzzword about T-shaped resources. Yeah, depth and breadth is what they're talking about. Yeah. So although we do UI-based or entry through the UI today, do we actually do UI-based testing today, or actually is that the point of entry? I'm going to say it's the latter. Yeah. So when we talk about UX-based testing, how good are we at that way? We're probably pretty good, to be honest. We're not mature enough because we spend too much time pissing about with environments. Yeah. So this is really allowing us to get the depth and the breadth in terms of each of these technology stacks to get a lot better at what we're doing. And what you find if you do that, and again, we will have some examples where, because we've applied ARD into what we're doing, and some of you guys have already experienced this, and look at yourself there, you are starting to see that actually test becomes real relevant earlier on in the SDLC. Yeah? Because we are not actually using test models as test models, we're using them actually as models for how the system is supposed to work. Yeah? So we are shifting left in what we do. We are creating robust test design. We create robust design, to be honest, not just test design. Yeah. These things are quick and stable. I mentioned up here. These things either pass or fail. There is no in between. There is no human interaction with the UI, and therefore they are far more stable. You'll hear stories around automation can happen in seconds rather than hours. Yeah. Fail fast, fail early. That's a big part of DevOps continuous delivery. In fact, there is a story in everyday banking where they run 6 iterations of tests in one day. You can't do that through the ice cream approach. Yeah. And actually, how much effort is there in execution? Well, there's none. Yeah. You can do it 6 times, you can do it 20 times if you want. It's just clicking your button. It's all manually deployed. It's all automatically deployed. It happens. There is no human interaction. Yeah. And importantly, what we're doing is we're building on this. Yeah. We know that Nationwide carries a shed load of debt today, not just technology debt, but in terms of design debt. We don't have full documentation sets, and therefore another way of facing into those problems is through creating models for what we don't know today. Yeah, rather than what we tend to do is kind of carry on the status quo of, we know how this section works, but I'll go and talk to somebody who's been in the organisation for 30 years to go and tell me how that works. But the reality is we all know that they all miss stuff because we're not writing it down. We're not using engineering discipline to those who've done engineering backgrounds. Yeah. So this is where we get into model-based testing. It's all about chipping away at it when these things are not greenfield. Very rarely in Nationwide do we have greenfield, it's all brownfield, yeah? That's a bit of the theory. Ice creams and the volcanoes. Yeah? Oh, what's this? That's your slide.
So I think we all are from testing community. So we either write test cases, we see requirements, we execute test cases, or if we don't do that, we are test manager, we report them, right? So we have no test, we need test cases. And how do we write test cases? We need something to write test cases, some requirement, some architecture or something. These are all our requirement from which what we do is we normally get business requirements, detailed business requirement, high level design document, architecture document, service specifications, use
Small
cases, entity relationship diagrams, batch process flows, ETL transformation logic or mappings, error conditions of a flow. All these are documents which we normally read, and then we analyze, and then we write test cases based on that. But when we analyze, we actually create a model which is in our head, how the system is actually working based on the documentation which is given to us, and then we write test cases, and when we preserve them in a test management tool like ALM or any other tools. Yeah, that's what we do today. And when there is a change in any one of the document, we struggle which test case to go and change, because there is a requirement mapping, but how do we develop the test case initially, we have forgotten about it, because either the person who has written the test case is gone, or he has moved on and he doesn't know the functionality. So how do we preserve that thinking which is gone in analyzing the document in a model? So there are tools which allow us to store these models, and he was referring to one. ARD is one of them. Okay. So these are our requirements. So risk analysis, this is which I mentioned, processes or data models. All these are our analysis. Based on that, we create models, and these models can be preserved using within ARD. In addition to the models, it also allows us to store a lot of other conditions which we normally miss in our test cases. The data, which we struggle to find the data requirements. We write a test case and we don't know which data we want. So for that, this tool allows us to store the data within the model. Then it does have an extension to export the test cases into test management tools. It does have a very good impact analysis tool. So basically, input, modeling, and execution. These are the three things. So I'm going to talk more about modeling. Input, we all know. How do we even go and change the way we input today, or we create document can also be a topic. We can talk about that later. So when we talk about agile requirement designer, it's a sophisticated tool which allows us to create models using model-based techniques, requirement gatherings, test design, and test creation as well as automation can be done using this tool.
CA stand for? Sorry.
Computer associates. So these are some features. So we all know visual diagrams. Visual diagrams are static diagrams where we can have flowcharts, design. So this tool also is similar. It does allow us to create visual test flows here, or visual flows. They're much richer than visual. How I will show you. We generate test cases from the model which we build. It provides links to the data requirements or CA test data manager. It has an impact analysis which I will show. There are a lot of other features which are not listed which I will show you. Optimization, integration with ALM, integration with DevTest and Jenkins, and Jira as well. So people ask if I have to build a model, which applications I can build model for, or which applications I can't build model for. Our answer is we can build model for everything. Even ETL testing, web services, UI testing. If there are loops within a process diagram, we can also have those complex models. There are optimization techniques to derive test cases. Full coverage, maximum coverage. So based on edges and nodes, what is a node and edge I will show you. All pair is a popular technique to create optimal test sets, whereas all coverage gives us a full coverage. Okay. There are different block types which we can create. So based on the interaction, whether it's a code block, error, assert, we can categorize each of these block types, and they are shown as different color, and they can hold different information. Now I'm going to go in demo straight away, and there are a few other slides which if you want to go get time, we can show. So this is how Agile Requirement Designer looks like. Okay. Right now we have version 2.7 rolled out in nationwide. I'm going to build a small model for just some logging functionality. Okay. As you see, you can create. This is a name. You can give small description. Author. It does have a version control, which we can straight away start using. So it preserve versions. It does have an option to provide documentation to the documentation link, which we can store. It does. We can pass parameters. It's like a program where we can pass parameters. Within the model, we can define variables. We can create variables, and we use them. I will show you how do we create variable from later also. So you can derive here or later. We can add roles, but I'm not using it. And click on finish. As soon as I click finish, it gives a start and end blocks to start with. You can have more than one start. Take an example of web service. It can have multiple end functions, endpoints. So you can have multiple endpoints, and a program can end into error or a success. For that, we can have multiple ends and so on. So I'm just creating a step. Open. Finish. That's a block. We have to connect this. So after logging, say assuming this is open login page and validation. After validation, it can either success or failure. Okay. So you can easily see there are two paths here. Yeah? So we can have two test cases. Yeah? So how do we write test cases? I'm just going in Path Explorer and clicking play. These are my two test cases ready for me. Okay. I can straight away export them into ALM. So the current version of ALM is old, so we have to go through Excel sheet. So it's creating an Excel sheet for us, and once this is ready, the test cases are ready for us to put into ALM. Yeah. Steps are already there, so I can open them, but I will hold because it doesn't have enough information. We just created a base model. Okay. So now when we will need to log in, now basically we need user ID and password to log in, right? So we don't mention that anywhere. So I can go and create user ID as a variable. I'm just passing say this allows only characters, and if I have to create an invalid user ID, it doesn't allow special characters. So here quickly I have changed the value and my data is ready for me. Yeah. Now if I have to, I know that after success I need to land on a landing page. Yeah. I can quickly start. So I have created an abstract model, and from there I have started adding details to my model. Yeah.
No. If it is false.
Sorry.
If it is false, you
Oh,
are.
that's fine.
Negative bit.
But he did mean to do that because the model is only as good as the input that you put in there.
Yes.
But interestingly, the whole idea of the model is it creates a basis for a conversation, which has just
Yeah.
happened then.
Yeah.
You didn't mean that.
Yeah. I didn't mean that. So
to the coloring as well.
Yeah, so now we want to say that error is an error, right? So there is an option to categorize error as error. So it turns red. And as we are on the landing page, it is a success. Yeah, so I'm assuming it is green. Okay. So this is how we created a small model. It does have its data now. Okay, and we know that there are 2 test cases, right? Let's save them. So I have saved them in an Excel sheet, but this gives an option to save them within the model also. Okay. When we save a model ARD test cases, do not forget to prefix with ARD so that we can categorize them in ALM. Okay. I'm just saving them, and you see 2 test cases are saved. Yeah. The steps are here. Data is also there. Okay. Now, if we want to give data request to the DPS, right? You can click on test data, and these are your data requirements. So you need a user with user ID test, and for this you don't really need, but then this is how we can create your data requirements. Okay. The other thing is, now assume that I've saved the test cases, but instead of error going into end, it goes to so I'm making a change. This is a requirement change, right? What happens to my test case? As soon as I click here, it shows an impact analysis that this test case is changed now. And what do you want to do? Repair. So it has repaired the test case, and it saved that. If you see, my test case 2 would end here. This is a new block, so I need to explicitly go and add that. But it has corrected this, so it is now valid. I can again go and build my test cases, and if I want to save them, click on OK. It saved only 1 test case because it is changed. So instead of saving 2, it has saved 1 test case. Now the other thing, I'm using a small model so that you can see. Now we create multiple test packs, like regression test pack or full test packs, and we always been asked what is your coverage of your regression test pack. How do we identify what's the coverage? So to build a automation test pack, it allows us to store multiple test packs within the model. So assuming I am only going to test my happy path in the automation, so I am going to save just selected automation test path. So I'm just saving 1 test case here. Okay. You see, automation is 1 and full test case are 2. It's got 3 basically because there's 1 here. Delete this. It has 2. So now if we have to compare this, if I go in cost and complexity, I can compare. So this is the full test pad. It has covered all the 7 nodes. And if I compare this with automation, it has only covered 5 nodes. So that's what 29% nodes are missing. You can see details of this from here if you want to know what exactly this means. But it is easy to tell the coverage to stakeholders that yes, I am running only 1 test case, but I am covering 5 nodes out of 7. Yeah. So this is a small model. Now if I open this block, it also allows us to store a lot of other information. I have already talked about variables, these properties. We have a web service. You can add details of this web service, stored paths. All the test cases which are covering my going through this particular block are listed here. There are 2 tests and 1 automation test. Requirement mapping. I think people do want to know how do we store requirement mapping. So if I go in properties of a model, you can create requirements. I'm just adding some random requirement, and then go in the blocks and start mapping the requirements here. Now I'm instead of sticking to this small model, I'm going to pick up an existing model which is more complicated, and I will show you repository. So it does allow, this is a repository where all the models can be stored. I'm going to pick up so we do talk about ST and SIT, right? So do we reuse the test cases which are written in ST into a SIT? We must be, right? But how do we reuse them properly and don't rewrite them again? We can create sub-models and reuse them. So this is my main model, and these orange functionalities are assumed as system test functionality. So we have reused them by creating a sub-model. So as I blow this, it will open in a new subflow. So this is the complex logic in that. And now if I show you the test cases which are created for this particular model, which are already there. So these are the test cases, detailed test cases. But when it touches the orange block, the steps come from the orange block, and all the combinations, so if it's, are from there. Now, if I have to make a small change within the model, I need to find out there is an impact analysis. If I click on show impact, it will go and calculate the impact on the main model, so that I would know what could break if I just make a change to that small block. Any questions, anyone? Now, yeah.
There's one high level question. I mean, to create a model is a requirement. Is a required, right? I mean, suppose if we have requirements, can we feed and the tool create a model itself, or we need to understand each and every requirements and then create a model?
So it does give an option to import from a lot of these tools. So if you already have these visual diagrams, you can import. But again, in Nationwide, we don't have VSDX formatted visuals. We have VSD, so we can't import. But you can. So if you have a requirement in a Word document,
Or say Excel sheet.
or an Excel sheet can be imported. Yeah. But if
I guess the point there is you can pretty much export anything in. It's more about the point that when we talk about the way that requirements have been created historically, they have very narrow understanding of how this thing is supposed to work, and therefore I would suggest that yes, you can import a lot of things as basis,
Right.
but then the next step is then to make that thing actually testable.
So basically, I mean, I have to create a model in any case, right? I mean, I can export requirements or functional design document, but I have to create a model based on that.
Yeah, and the reality is you do that anyway. You just don't do it through this. Your model might be you create lots and lots of ALM scripts today. It's a model, but this is we're proposing a more consumable way of doing it, and a lot more efficient in that you can create new test cases, you can do impact changes and things like that much more effectively.
I'm just thinking of advice as well. I mean, suppose requirements are huge, right? And there are so many flows, so we have to create all the models, right?
yeah, so you have to break down the model. So what we have done is SO is we had day one batch where there were 36 different small models we created.
Okay.
We set together and created them. And we, instead of creating one big model, we have created small models, the way you just saw here. So this model, which I'll show you. But before that, I wanted to show you quickly how do we create blocks. If you don't have time to go and create the block, you can start typing here and click OK. You see, it has actually. Just typing. So it recognizes what is this and creates blocks for me. So you don't need to go through that lengthy process of extracting from this. So there are shortcuts also available. So if you want to save time, there are a lot of shortcuts available. So this is how. So instead of creating one big model, we can create small models, and multiple people can work on each model and then integrate. So that's how we should do. and that will.
Is your question that you might have 10,000 requirements, and therefore how do you get to a place where everything's in there?
How do you start this?
Not basically performance of the tool, but yeah, like I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, it wasn't about performance. I guess the thing is, and this is probably, have you ever heard of the technical debt quadrant?
Kind of.
Yeah. So today, you've got that problem regardless of whether these things are in here or not. There are too many requirements to articulate what level of coverage or what level of design
Right.
we effectively get, and therefore what we tend to do is concentrate our effort on the area we know is changing. And therefore, in terms of the bit that I had in terms of how do you get, you start chipping away at it. So if you started modelling that bit with the understanding, you still need to run the regression pack in the way they're always done around it until those bits are actually being changed. That's a step forward.
But yeah, that comes after. I mean, at the later stages, right? So suppose like you are assigned to a project, like it is supposed to start, and you have requirements. You don't have enough information, right? So
Right.
until you create all the models, if I understand correctly, you cannot proceed with
So
it.
there is a way. So
So
you,
I guess
you want to
the
talk
model,
about
the model is more the end product, is it not? So if you get a set of requirements, and this is where I didn't use TDD or BDD or any of those buzzwords that we'll say we'll do in certain agile areas, but we don't.
Okay.
Yeah. If you've got those requirements, somebody today, be that waterfall or whoever, is interpreting those things either rightly or wrongly. Yeah. And therefore, where we're doing and working with certain areas is to say, actually, rather than create your Word documents to articulate how these designs work, do it in here.
Okay.
Because what we can have there, and as we did when you made a mock-up earlier on, is a conversation about do we have a common understanding of how this thing is supposed to work?
Okay.
this,
So basically, this is okay. I mean, the next question it's just a test cases. I mean,
Before
test
you go
effort,
there-
or it's like a joint effort along with the designer as well.
I think I
We
can
should
I
start
add-
from the design phase as well.
So basically, I want to answer your first question also. So when you get a requirement, they are too high level and they are not, details are missing, right? So you can build an abstract model with the requirements which you have. So you can have a model like, it's very simple like this. And blocks which you don't know. You know there is a black box called login is a functionality, or an ordering is a functionality which you have. But you don't know details. You can create abstract block and create a very high level model, and as soon as you start getting details, then this model. So basically, this is also an abstract model. When it was built initially, these were simple boxes, and when the details of each of these blocks came, then the detailed models were created. So when you are in the beginning of the project, you would only have this block, and when you get details, you start adding details to your model and enrich that.
If you got Ganesh's name one with the decision table on it, because I think that's a really good example of problem where
I can build
is
this.
there anybody for them?
No, I can build that quickly for you. Yeah, let's do a small exercise for you.
So they would always come in and say we have big data issues. Yeah. Now the problem was that we didn't really understand the combinations of data that we get from our interface, and therefore what Ganesh did in there is started to build out an understanding through a table structure, a matrix if you like, of the different combinations, not of data but of responses that you would get from the interface, because it was never about the data, it was about the rules of the interface.
Right.
And then we then started talking to the developers around, well, is this how it's supposed to work? And therefore you eventually get to the outcome of, yes, we have a common understanding of how this thing should work, rather than I keep thrashing lots and lots of data. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. So basically, we require designer or better help as
Oh,
well.
absolutely, yeah, and the whole thing is about collaboration. It's an aid to collaboration.
Okay. Do they require build the tool understanding as well, or just a common
So
understanding?
everybody saw that Mahesh did that wrong just a minute ago, and nobody has used. Oh well, some people have used ARD, but you didn't need to use ARD to understand that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a flow diagram. Everyone.
Yeah.
I'm just creating a random decision table.
And really, this is to the point where historically we would say we get a lot of errors from the UI because something has gone wrong down the stack.
Right.
But this is interface testing,
Yeah.
where we're saying actually we understand the interface from A to B, and these are the combinations that should be talking to.
Right.
So that's where we start to chip away at essentially moving to the volcano manager.
I've created a small model now. How many test cases can this model have? Guesses.
Depends on the data.
Huh?
How many basins we added? Around
By looking at this, just don't see, you have not seen what is happening here. So, by looking at this, 3. Yeah.
Type of testing as well, like
Yeah.
SIT, okay, or 2 test cases, system test is required
But
more.
to test all my paths, you would have 3. Yes. It has got 8. Now I will show you why 8. So there are 4 outputs which I have only covered 3, so there are 3. So there are 8 different combinations which are deriving my outputs. Yeah, that's why there are 8 paths which I have missed some of them. I have missed 0. Yeah, I have missed null as well. I have used null. So you wanted to show this decision table. So if you don't know the functionality, but you know the outcomes based on your inputs, then you can come up with a model like this. So it doesn't need to be a detailed model, but it will give you all the possible paths required.
I guess for me, like these are test data combination of the test cases, and
You're treating your functionality as a black box, and you are deriving that.
you're feeding the different
They are test
data
combinations, they're also business rules.
They are also business
They
rules.
work on the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you
But
are
again,
testing,
like if you're creating a test data, that's my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, like if you're creating test data as well, you can fulfill that requirement by
And
testing
I
data.
guess that's the interesting. We're not creating test data. We're
No.
creating business rules.
Business rules, yeah.
Now, for
Okay.
testing, we do fulfil them through test data. But the big problem we have today is that when we're testing these things, what we tend to do is ask for 500,000 records or give me a copy of live, not because we need that much, but because we don't really understand the interface rules, and therefore we flush everything through, hoping that everything will be triggered.
Because same situation happened in my area as well. I mean, where your business scenarios are big enough, right? But you cannot fulfill all that by test cases. Then you cover all those by the test data. Say, I mean,
That's the anti-pattern by which the business rules are far smaller than the number of data we've got.
so take this example. If I have to run this, would you run in iteration? You might run with 10 different user IDs, right? This is a login page. We normally don't use just one user ID and log into this. We do a data-driven test cases, and why are we using those 4 or 10 different users? Because they have different attributes of there, right? Which are not there in this model. I only got two different users here. One is a valid and one is invalid. There could be a admin user which I have missed. But if I add that in my model, then I will get my combinations of that here. So when you say we need different data, we actually are worried about the attributes which are not covered within the model. As soon as you add the attributes and details of within the model, you will start getting the combinations here. And then you will know how much data is required for your testing. Yeah? So so decision table is can be used at multiple places. If you have a web service, you don't know the business flow of web service, but you know when it goes with certain data and it comes with an error or success, then you can use this combination. Basically, request, if you analyze the request, find the 5 parameters which derive your output, we can create a decision table like that. So business rules, configuration testings, if you have 4 OS and if you have different internet or browsers, if you want to come up with a combination, we can use this. Data mappings, even ETL testing, we can create this. So a lot of places we can use this.
How do we go ahead with ETL testing? What's the major key of that?
ETL testing is if you have to categorize ETL testing into 3. Basically, one is your batch. Batch is a process which can be similar to this flow. Yeah. Then we have it's data combinations, right? So basically, the transformation is from one. So transformation can be, if you pick up a column, it can go into multiple columns, right? How do we apply the transformation logic? So basically, we have to treat one data item as an entity, and the transformation logic as your process, like this, and then outcome. So you have to derive the source and the target. So based on that, we come up with the combination. So if your column holds 5 different types, account types, and based on that you have different transformation logic. You try to cover all of them in your model, and the ARD will tell you the combinations or paths which need to be tested for that particular column.
Yes.
Just-
Yeah, that's one example. There are others
Yeah,
also. Yeah. And if you would know that there are only 10 different combinations required, so you create the source data which is required, and at the end you also create the target data which will be come out from that transformation, because you know the transformation logic now.
But then, what if in case we are not getting any transformations done, it's just the job done, the source file is going to be as it is, the data is not going to change. So in that case, do we also use the model?
But then you are testing the batch process, isn't it? Simple. It's simple
It's
copy,
just
right?
yeah.
It's simple copy. There is no
There's
transformation.
probably four actually. You've got what's the extract rules, what's the transform rules, what's the load rules. So for your scenario, you're missing the middle one.
Yeah.
And then have you got data quality issues?
Yeah.
Which unfortunately the first and the third one don't actually manage very well.
Okay.
They should manage them.
Related to, I have just high level questions. I mean, as we are designing model, right, based on transformation logic. So sometimes like they are not straightforward, and like multiple transformation logic involved in another mapping rules as well. So how we integrate the models? Say suppose like I have built 10 separate models.
Yeah.
Can we integrate and optimize the test cases?
Yeah.
Because what happens like in straightforward, in my project I have seen that multiple times, they can be 1,000 test cases.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're gonna optimize that, because you're not going to show all the times, whatever the actual test cases. So can we do that? Like, can we
And I guess this is the beauty of this thing in terms of impact
That's right.
analysis and your scenario. Our brains are not built to compute those things,
Right.
and therefore we've got to defer to something like this to
Right.
get an optimized test set and understand the impact of change.
Right, because tool is smart. I mean, I'm saying first time it's a smart one, but if we can do
Yeah.
that,
So take these three as your three different transformation logics. So you can have these integrated. So they are separately held in different models. If I open this, assume that I don't have an ETL model for you to show, but it won't be different than what we have built. So this has a transformation logic. There are success. You can see there are success. This is a different one. If you see there is a success coming. So only based on the success, if you have a quality data, then only go in this. Otherwise, go here. That can also be integrated here.
So if you do test case optimization from that top model, then I think you'll show
that's
the ask then, and then once you've done that, if you change one of the bits in the model, you'll demonstrate the fact that you can show impact.
right.
Yeah.
Say like individual model, you are having 10 test cases, 3 models, 30 test cases.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna integrate, say like
So
20
this
test cases.
okay. So this has got 89 test cases. This is optimized test cases. Okay. If I go in any of these,
So show the
models,
generation way.
should I show?
Yeah.
It's going to take long time. So that's why I want to go in a small model to show you. Yeah. So this is a small model where I'm going to create all possible paths. It has got 9 test cases. Yeah. And it does have it doesn't have. It has got 9.
a long time. How long is a long time?
Yeah.
30 seconds?
It's going to take more time.
Do
It's
it.
quite complicated. Let's try. Should I go for all?
Do an optimized one.
And it's got 14 paths. But there are certain loops which are within that. We are going I think there are loops. Yeah. So what has happened here? Why we got 18 paths? 89. There were manual paths built and added to this because the tech practice wanted some additional test cases to be derived, so we created this. So you see the small model had only 9 test cases. And this has got how many? 61. So take this example. This picture is not changing. Yeah. But the test case is changing. So for all these test cases, all the paths are covered here. Got it? So by looking at this, it looks like just one test case, but when it goes here, the internal behavior is taken care by the test case, and that's how it is optimized.
Because you have put the conditions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is how we can integrate them.
So if you imagine the ideal, the Nirvana which we will never get to was Nationwide with one block, and then it would filter down to absolutely every single system that Nationwide has, down to every service that we have, down to right down to the very lowest of it. We'll never get there. Don't get me wrong.
The other
But-
level, the other level of optimization which you get from during integration is, you see the highlighted thing. The integration point can also be optimized here. So when you are optimizing with a small internal flow, then you can choose any of the optimization technique. If you know this sub-model is well tested, you don't want to go with full paths, then you can go with the all pairs, then it will give you a small number of test cases. So that's optimization is also available for you.
If you make a change to one of those submodels, isn't it?
So this arrow, instead of coming here, it's called here. That's a small change. Save this. Save.
Save it and then change it back when you're finished.
Yeah. So I'm making a change. That's the impact analysis, but I'm not. This is within the model, current model. I'm not going to change this. Let me just save this model. I don't want to do this. It's their model. It's reviews. Yeah. Yeah. So let me see if I can. Yeah, I do have another model which I can show you.
See, if you imagine, in today's world, we all sit in a room with the SME who either knows or doesn't know what the change is today. And it's based on their understanding of what the change is. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong.
That's right.
Whereas actually this is an opportunity to take that in and say, actually, we can make what we deem to be changes on the fly and then properly understand the impact of change. Because depending on how accurate our models are, reflecting on the system, and then we can then make logical decisions based off the impact of change. So how many test cases do I need to then generate, which we can do instantly, off the back of the change we think we're making?
Basically, backbone is that flow, right? I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
If that flow is accurate,
Yeah, yeah. Which is why this is a modelling tool? It is, but is it an aid to collaboration? Yeah.
yeah.
So
That's what's important.
this is a small model of SID. It has got this small model and inside that another small model. Okay, I can make a change to this. I'm just adding something. I'm just going to save this. I will have to derive test cases for this.
One of the other myths around Agile is you can't do documentation. We're kind of doing it quite quickly now, and it's all living and breathing. You know, we don't use Word documents, we don't use Excel. That's the problem. We create them and put them on the shelf. This is all living, breathing stuff that you should be able to do.
So this is, let's see the heartbeat. Yeah, it says that the small flow is now changed. So what do you want to do? So as soon as I go here. I don't know why it's not doing the impact analysis properly. Is it because I haven't saved it? Picked up wrong model. But the impact will come from here. Should I use one of your model? Yeah, I don't know. As you are here, you would know what's being changed.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
One of the interesting things is it is all version controlled as well. So if Mahesh cocked up some he knows about it, and he can go back to the previous version.
Should with open banking?
Big services created IB services.
So it was kind of shared repository or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea being that this is, when I talk about the Havana, we have one centralized nationwide. This is an enterprise repository by which, you know, for the most part, should you be creating models from fresh, no, you should be going to this repository and pulling them off. We very rarely do things greenfield in nationwide, so changing stuff that we've already got. And therefore, as we start to build this up, as we're already seeing, different areas, you know, we've got a lot of services that are already in here and starting to be reused.
And we can reuse.
Absolutely, yeah.
Does it have check-in and check-out also? If someone is working on
Yeah,
Yeah.
retrieve RC. Does it? Retrieve RC.
I mean, what we need to do is a bit of work around what that enterprise repository looks like in terms of, as I said earlier on, everything is a model, and therefore we need to go from use cases down to, you know, use cases that talk about business journeys, down to actual systems that implement those, down to the very lowest level of service and API and things like that, so you know how to basically navigate that repository.
Yeah. So use case is a version which you can pick. So let's pick up a use case.
Somebody want to get in the room?
Yeah, we need to
We're done, yeah.
Our goes to
Yeah,